I really don't know where to start this video. I don't know how to even start to explain. It's not a video that I ever want to make. I don't know where to start to even explain it. I don't even understand it myself. On the 25th of July, I woke up at 6:30 in the morning. My daughter had woke up crying. So I went and got her and brought her into my bed, and she lay cuddling me, and we both fell asleep. About 8 o'clock, maybe 8:30, I woke up to quite what felt like a really, really hard kick in my tummy. First, it was movement. It was movement from Jackson. You can probably guess by now that he was a boy. I felt a really hard kick or something. And when I sat up in the bed, I started bleeding profusely. I couldn't stop it. My husband ran and called an ambulance, and they were here incredibly quickly. A midwife from our local midwifery team arrived really quickly too, and she walked into our room and she asked me to get undressed, and she was really sweet. At that point I knew what was happening. She told me that she could see the placenta and that it was very likely that my placenta had abrupted and I was going to give birth. Within a couple of seconds of her telling me that, the bleeding started to get heavier and heavier, and before I even blinked, I was on a stretcher and being wheeled out of my house to an ambulance. I begged them to try and save him. I knew they couldn't. They told me that I had to push. And I didn't want to. And I told them I wasn't going to. The ambulance got to the hospital incredibly quickly. The sirens were on, and I was being pulled about here, there and everywhere. And I asked them to please make sure that I went home. I went back home to my babies. I didn't want my babies to not have their mum. When we got to the hospital, we went into an emergency entrance, and in the hallway was lots of doctors and midwives waiting for me. They took me into a room that they have on the labour ward that is specially for mums that are going to or about to experience baby loss. Within a couple of minutes of being in there, Jackson was born. He was born asleep. Between the time we left my house and getting to the hospital, Jackson had died. And once he was born, my bleeding started to get a lot heavier. And they gave him to me and I held him on my chest. He was so small. We knew straight away he was a boy. There was no hiding that. The placenta got stuck. Even though the placenta was coming first at the beginning, Jackson had managed to come past the placenta and he was born first. And then when they tried to get the placenta, my body pulled it back, and there was a lot of trouble trying to get that. And because the bleeding was going so fast, I was surrounded by so many people, and my tummy started to feel really, really heavy. It was the strangest feeling, but it was incredibly heavy. And when I said that out loud, the nurse, there was a senior midwife that was across the room, and she ran across the room back to me and said, "It's okay, we're just gonna, I'm just gonna have a feel of your tummy." And I knew something was wrong. The amount of blood that I'd already lost, I knew something was going on. And she pressed into my tummy, and everything got a lot heavier and a lot faster. And I remember the nurses carrying bags of blood, of my blood, away from the bed. And then my husband got there. Because it was an emergency, there wasn't time for him to get in with me. We didn't have childcare on site. When he arrived, I told him to stop. I didn't want him to get over to me because I didn't know how he was going to react when he saw Jackson. I don't think he realised what was happening. I don't think he realised that Jackson was going to be born and had been born when he got there. And I shouted at him to just stop where he was. And the midwife went over and spoke to him and explained what. I'll never forget the look on his face. How devastated he was. He came over and he held Jackson's hand and he kissed me on the head. We just kind of sat there in silence and let the doctors and the midwives do what they needed to do. I had injections in my legs for the placenta. I had so many different needles and cannulas and all sorts being pumped into me. And I asked the midwife to sit me up so I could see Jackson properly and I could give him a cuddle properly. When she sat me up, everything kind of went wrong from there. She sat me up and I immediately felt like I couldn't breathe. It felt as though somebody had their hand around my heart. And I couldn't see. And I had a stinging, freezing cold feeling from head to toe. It was the scariest feeling I've ever experienced in my life. And I shouted at the midwife and told her something was wrong. I didn't feel okay. And I honestly thought that I didn't think I was going to make it home. Kevin took Jackson off my chest. And the midwives were around me and they laid me back so far back that my head was really like hanging backwards. And they strapped me up to some oxygen and they were pumping fluids into me. And it took a little while, what felt like forever. But I managed to feel okay. They saved my life. That midwifery team and those doctors saved my life. I just wish they could have saved Jackson's. When I was feeling better, the room got really, really quiet. Midwives were coming in and out every so often, but the room was just really, really quiet. And we both just sat there holding him. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. I really didn't know what to do. I couldn't move from the bed because I was still incredibly poorly. Because we didn't have the childcare that we needed. My husband had to go home, and I had no choice but to stay there by myself. They put Jackson into a cot. It's a special cot that it had a cooling pad that would lay underneath him to keep his body in a good condition so he could stay with me. I sang to him. I read him a story. And I gave him so many cuddles. At one point I was allowed to take him and lay in the bed, just holding him. And I spoke to him for hours, telling him how much we loved him. We made lots of promises. The day after he was born, I decided I wanted to go home. I didn't want to leave him there, but I knew I had to. It wasn't fair on him for me to keep him there. We had some photos taken. We gave him messages. We gave him little gifts to carry with him. We gave him a teddy. We had matching teddies. He had one that he cuddled all the way through the night. That was with him in the cot. And I had one that I cuddled all the way through the night. And then just before we left, we switched them so he could have my cuddles and I could have his. He has a little wooden heart next to him with all of his brothers and sisters' names on it. He can have a part of them with him. And they can have a part of him with them, because they've all got matching hearts that they will keep with his name on it. And he also has, he has a little wooden heart. His daddy loves you. So all of our love and our cuddles are with him wherever he goes. We have all his cuddles here with us. We have a little box where we have his handprints and his footprints. We have his little blanket that he had. We decided, after a lot of conversations, that we wanted to go ahead and have a post-mortem done. At first, we only wanted to have him looked at and x-rayed, and those are the first two. The first one is where the doctors just look at him and examine him. The second option is to have x-rays done to look, see what's going on. And the third option is to have biopsies, to have a look at what had happened, to see what went wrong. They took swabs. We went with the third option, and there is a reason for that. But before we went with that, they took swabs from the placenta, from his mouth and his belly button and his ears and his nose. Yeah, it was really difficult to watch. Part of me didn't want to watch that. I didn't want to take my eyes off him for a second. Then we had a really long chat with the doctor that was with us, and she was amazing. And we decided to go with the third option of having a full post-mortem done. And there is a reason. When they do a full post-mortem, they take biopsies of certain things, and they will be tested to see anything, you know, if there was anything wrong that was going wrong with him, that was going wrong with me, any infections. But then once the biopsies are taken, there are two options that you're given: whether the biopsies, the small samples, will be put back and given to him, or they are taken to for medical science, where they can try and further themselves in medicine for premature babies. And she explained that just those small samples could save thousands of premature babies. And at that point, I was telling everybody he had to have something, a legacy, anything. I didn't want his death to be in vain. I want everybody to look at it and be really sad. I wanted them to hear his name and be proud and be happy. So we wanted him to have that legacy, that he was going to help other babies that were being born and too early and needed help. So I wanted him to have that legacy. When we got home, I panicked and I broke down, and I started shouting at my husband that I didn't want him to have a post-mortem. I didn't want him to be pulled about, even though I know in the back of my mind that that is what we wanted to happen and that's the legacy we wanted to give him. And the idea of anybody touching him, it broke my heart. I cried so hard, and it wasn't something I wanted my other children to see. It took me a while, but after finally getting some sleep, it wasn't much sleep, but it was sleep nonetheless, I realised that that is what we wanted for him. We wanted him to have that legacy, and we wanted him to have his name there. It's now 6 days since he was born, and yesterday I got a message from the midwives at our clinic, and they told me that he had been moved to Cambridge, ready to see the specialists for his post-mortem. They've been absolutely amazing. They've been really, really good to keep us knowing where he is and what's happening. And it's going to be a long time until we find out the results of anything. Because of the pandemic, everything's backlogged. So it's going to be about 3 months until we find out. We've been told that he will be back here in about 10 days. We are planning his funeral. It's not words I ever wanted to say. Not one part of me has ever wanted to even imagine planning a funeral for one of my babies. But we have to do it, and I want him to have something special. I want to scream his name out. I want everybody to know who he is. And I want to give him something. Anything. So his death wasn't in vain. It's by far the hardest thing I've ever experienced in my life, and there has been some things. Nothing will ever come close to this. At the moment, everything's clouded and we don't really know how to move forward from it. We know what we want to do. We know what we want to change. We know that, the promises we've made to him, and we will keep them. But in this very moment, I just don't know how we get there. Everything is at a standstill. And everybody's been so sweet, family and friends. But we just want a little quiet. I don't know how long. We just need a little bit of quiet. I'm sorry that you've come here to have to find a video like this. I didn't want to ever have to tell anybody something like this. It's not something you ever think will happen to you. We have to be strong for our children. We have to be strong for each other, and we have to be strong for him. We promised him that this wouldn't break anything apart. We'd have this make us stronger. And I'm still very poorly. I came away from the hospital early against my doctor's advice. Well, not his advice, but what he felt was right. I just needed to be at home. I needed to be with my husband and my other children. And it's going to be a long road ahead of us, but we just need a little bit of quiet. I knew from the start that something wasn't quite right with our pregnancy. Something didn't feel right. I had lots of dreams where I kept bleeding in my dreams, and I woke up quite frantic a few times and told my husband about it. I didn't ever imagine it actually happening. I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't think we'd ever get to this. We need some answers. I feel like we can't settle until we've got some answers. We need to get our heads around what's happened. There's not much more I can say. When we are ready, we will be back. But right now, we need to heal as a family. I love you all. And I want to thank you for being there through our pregnancy. And we will be back on YouTube when we feel that the time is right for us. I hope you understand that. This is not a goodbye to Jackson. This is just a good night. And we'll see you when we get there. I know it's going to be a long time from now. But that means more kisses and cuddles when we get there. Thank you for being there for us. Hopefully we'll be back soon. Bye for now.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are grey. You don't know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.